first time I went on the street, I was shabbily dressed up by my pimps. I was kind of naked. I couldn't stand it. I ran and hid myself at the back of the trash bins because I was so ashamed. I was so depressed, very sad, but there was nothing I could do. I still go back there every day. And gradually, by so doing, I lost my dignity as a woman. I lost my pride. The woman in me went out and I became wild.
Globally, men, women and children are deceived or coerced by human traffickers for the purpose of exploitation in all its traditional and ever-changing forms. No country and few communities are immune to this multidimensional phenomenon. In recent decades, human trafficking has become one of the major concerns of the international community and one of the most profitable crimes worldwide. Human trafficking is a monster with many heads, run by both organized crime syndicates and independent opportunists. It impacts on individuals and societies in all regions of the world. There are many indications that most people who are trafficked are never identified as trafficking victims or provided with any form of assistance. At its core, human trafficking is a process that results in the exploitation of people. The forms of exploitation are diverse and ever-evolving. Our failure to recognize the exploitation that occurs around us is reflected by the small numbers of identified trafficking victims. The year 2000 saw a significant milestone in international efforts to stop human trafficking. National governments began to sign the United Nations Protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children, supplementing the United Nations Transnational Organized Crime Convention. The United Nations Protocol provided the first internationally agreed definition of trafficking in persons, requiring countries to criminalize and collectively act against human trafficking.
The Trafficking in Persons Protocol requires that the crime of trafficking is defined through a combination of three constituent elements. It's the act, what is being done by the offender, the means, how it is being done by the offender, and the exploitative purpose, why the offender does this. As an example, imagine a scenario in which a person is being offered a lucrative job abroad and is being helped into another country, but ends up working in a factory where he or she is never allowed to leave and is being forced to work for long hours in poor conditions. This clearly falls under the definition of trafficking. It is, however, important to recognize that exploitation takes many forms. The Trafficking Protocol does not define the term exploitation, but it includes a non-exhaustive list of forms of exploitation, such as sexual exploitation, forced labor or services, slavery or practices similar to slavery, servitude, or the removal of organs. The Trafficking Protocol states that the consent of a trafficked victim to any intended exploitation becomes irrelevant where any of the prohibited means, such as deception, force, or the abuse of a position of vulnerability has been used by the trafficker. This means that no person can consent to being exploited. In trafficking cases involving children, the trafficking protocol states that trafficking is established regardless of whether or not the means have been used.
Human trafficking takes advantage of conflicts, humanitarian disasters, and the vulnerability of people in situations of individual or community crisis. Traffickers scout for potential victims, targeting men, women and children in countries where there is war, civil unrest, persecution of minority or racial religious groups, natural disaster, economic collapse, corruption and poverty, or a lack of opportunities or hope. Social upheavals and the fragmentation and corruption of traditional cultures destroy group identity, family stability and values. Vulnerable groups and families can become directly or indirectly involved with human trafficking. Joy was first trafficked within her own country, aged 10, for domestic servitude, and later sold by her boyfriend to be trafficked to Europe for prostitution.
I came from a very poor home. My parents are very poor. They don't have any money. Sometimes my father beats my mother because of no money, no food in the house, no money to take the children to school, nothing.
Children are trafficked globally into any area where profits can be made, ruthlessly exploited into a wide range of work, denying them an education, robbing them of their dignity, and exposing them to dangerous work, damaging their physical and mental health. The root causes of human trafficking, combined with gender violence and discrimination, make women and children particularly vulnerable. In many parts of the world, young men and boys are press-ganged into forced labour, including in the fishing industry, for example, and forced to carry out dangerous work. Children are used to unravel nets with their small fingers on shore, but also underwater, where they risk drowning and severe health problems. Increasing numbers of children are trafficked into the global sex industry, where exploitation occurs in many forms, including pornography and prostitution. Traffickers prey on people's dreams of a better life elsewhere. Natasha lived with her grandparents, and as the oldest sister in a flock of young children, she was the main breadwinner, with responsibility for the whole family. Her friend introduced her to a trafficker who regularly visited their village and promised her work abroad.
Recrutorul nu întotdeauna este și traficantul, adică recrutorul este persoana care face oferta sau face propunerea de a pleca peste hotare. În calitate de recrutor poate fi orice persoană, indiferent de gen, pot fi și femei și bărbați, uneori chiar familii sunt în rolul de recrutor. La fel, poate fi o persoană cunoscută, fie că e vorba de o persoană din comunitate, fie că este vorba de o persoană chiar de un grad de rudenie. Am avut cazuri când în calitate de recrutor au fost chiar proprii părinți în cazul traficului de minori.
Unlike drugs and weapons, human beings can be sold or re-trafficked countless times, making investment in one individual exceedingly profitable. Victims are vulnerable to deception at many levels, creating numerous risks for them as individuals. Vladimir was approached by traffickers posing as legal agents, able to procure genuine documents and promising him agricultural work abroad.
Ei mi-au zis că nu-ți trebuiește pașaport, numai diferența de naștere este. și mi-au zis pe lună 1500 de lei. Lucrez și încă deasupra până la $50. Lucram până la orele 9 seara. Nu ne plătea nimic.
Sometimes people are deceived by traffickers who start a relationship with them and then afterwards coerce them into prostitution. Claudia from South America was 16 when she met John on the internet. Her mother was dead, and her father sexually abused her. It was easy to lure her to Europe with promises of a modelling career. On arrival, she was locked in a flat, raped by her trafficker, and forced to sexually service clients. Trafficking may involve the exploitation of persons who sell their organs to criminals.
Da, după așa am venit acasă, vroiam să lucrez ceva și nu puteam. Și de-aia mă gândeam, ia că puteți lucrează, dar eu nu pot lucra. Dar că nu știam cum, deodată când m-am dus cum ați și, dar pe urmă am văzut și îmi pare rău, dar nu puteai întoarce nimic înapoi.
Men, women and children may move from one place to another, both willingly and legally. They may also cross borders illegally. During transportation, victims are often subjected to the most appalling conditions.
It took me 3 years to go to Spain because I was thinking that we want to take the flight because I don't know that we have to walk with our leg. That's why a lot of people die, because they look their strength. I was afraid that one day I can even die like all these people. But I believe in God. I survived it.
You were going to pass through the desert where there's no water, and they had to go through a lot of sexual abuse just to get water. Some of them have had to drink their urine. Some of them have had to drink their own menses just to survive. And they have had to give to other men, because now we are now having jockeys, young boys who have been trafficked along that route too. And they also are turning into abusers. They also ask the girls to give them their urine. They also sexually abuse the girls. Some of them get pregnant along the road. Some of them get, illegal abortion. So there's a lot of trauma that they've gone through.
Every conceivable form of transport can and is used, exposing both smuggled migrants and trafficked persons to considerable dangers and indignities. People risk dying from exposure, thirst, starvation, shock, drowning, suffocation in transport containers, and being murdered. Migrants, stranded, robbed and abused, are vulnerable to predatory traffickers who recruit at every stage throughout the often long migratory movement. Smugglers may also directly collaborate with traffickers.
There are 4 main differences between the crime of trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants. First of all, it's the consent. Most smuggled migrants consent to being smuggled, while in the case of trafficking in persons, the victim may not consent, or if consenting, the consent becomes irrelevant where any of the means have been set forth. Second element is the transnationality. Smuggling of migrants always involves the illegal crossing of a border, while in a trafficking case it might occur both domestically and by crossing of borders. Thirdly, it's the issue of exploitation. The relationship between a smuggler and the smuggled migrant usually ends after the illegal crossing of a border, while the relationship between a trafficker and the victim is an ongoing process of exploitation at the destination point. Fourthly is the source of profit. The smuggler generates income through a one-off transaction by facilitating the illegal entry of a person into another country, whereas the continuous exploitation of the trafficked victim at the destination point generates the ongoing profit of a trafficker.
Physical abuse is not the only form of control method used by traffickers. After long periods of harsh treatment, some victims can become almost immune to direct physical violence. Therefore, many different forms of psychological pressure are used by traffickers, who, for example, threaten the victim's family at their home. Angela was orphaned aged 8 and trafficked into domestic servitude in her home country. Aged 15, she was trafficked for prostitution in another continent. Her traffickers imposed debts on her, of which after 3 years she still owed half. When she refused to pay back the remaining amount and denounced her trafficker in court, the traffickers murdered her beloved younger brother. Alone and desperate, she faces an uncertain future. Some forms of control methods are culturally rooted and involve rituals and both written and spoken oaths. Traffickers may, for example, take a person to a shrine and pay a juju priest to perform rituals providing protection and good luck. When priests take body material, like menstrual blood, pubic hair, fingernails, etc. from victims, and combine them with organic and non-organic material, it is believed to create a nexus, enhancing occult power, so threats can even be enforced from a distance. Many victims are terrified to denounce traffickers, as this will incur the wrath of the gods, bad luck, madness, sickness, and/or death. Each trafficking case is colored by unique cultural, psychological, and social factors, and therefore should be analyzed and evaluated individually. Many victims of trafficking have experienced multiple traumas and may present a bewildering array of both psychological and physical symptoms. These may include apathy, memory loss, extreme and sudden mood changes, hostility, shame, self-destructive behavior, and an array of psychosomatic disturbances like headache, fatigue, dizzy spells, general pain, nausea, and insomnia.
The victims of trafficking, whether it's sexual or labour exploitation, have obviously gone through an extremely traumatic experience. The psychological, the physical and the sexual injuries that they'll have sustained will probably, in many cases, be with them for life. They're not going to get over that. There'll be something there which will be permanently in their mind or on their body.
Sarah was captured by the Lord's Resistant Army, notorious for kidnapping children, and the abuse of young girls and boys used as soldiers and sex slaves.
When somebody has been trafficked to prostitution in the streets, to being a house slave, to being a child soldier, or any kind of trafficking, it is very, very difficult to get out of it. Because let's take, for example, the child soldiers. Some of them are rescued and they come out of being slaves in slavery in the army of where they've been trafficked to. But psychologically, they're not free out of it. You cannot get it out of them. They can go smiling in the day, but when you go to sleep, you dream about all these things that happen. It doesn't go away. It stays with you forever.
A woman will come in and say, you know, I was tricked to come over here. I thought I was going to be getting this well-paid job as a waitress. I got paid, I didn't get paid, but I was going to get paid when I was here, send money back for my family, really improved their life. When I got here, I got gang raped by the people that took me over. I got raped by the people I was sold to. I then get made to have sex with 20 people a day. And then the officer says, oh, I see you've got a false passport there. And focuses on the passport. It's incredible. How can you do that? But it's happening in all countries around the world. And the traffickers are laughing at us because we're just playing into their hands. We've got to focus on the traffickers. To do that, we've got to look after the victims. To do that is just simple, basic human rights. What you'd expect of people in your family, how you'd expect them to be treated, that's all you need to do. And yeah, they're experts, and we work in partnership with our experts. We work with the Poppy Project and other agencies, and they'll help get the trust and provide the support. But that initial meeting, if you're law enforcement, you've got to show that you understand the offence of trafficking, you understand that the documentation is a really small, insignificant part of it, and that you know that it doesn't affect your overall investigation, and that you just got to show some pity, some compassion, and frequently that's where law enforcement goes wrong.